All right, and we're up. Welcome. Hey, everybody. Good morning, good evening, good morning, and somewhere in between. It's Wednesday, February 16th, 2022. There are lots of you on the call as usual, which is good. Lots of people have webcams on too, which is really nice. We'll do a couple of housekeeping items, which is if you're new on the call, we have a tradition: say hi, introduce yourself, get harassed. There's lots of sarcasm that flows around here, so all purely out of love and the enjoyment of the giver of the sarcasm, I think. Yeah, actually, so we should pause there. Right? We should say, hey, yeah, is there anybody new on this call? We have a lot of calls, almost one every day. But if you haven't gotten a chance to say hi on this call, do so. Say hi. And you can hide behind your webcam, but we'll call you out anyway. So I think everyone on the call, except for potentially two folks, maybe haven't gotten a chance to say hi before. The two folks might be Rudaraj and Augusta. Have you guys gotten a chance to say hi on this call, to just to introduce yourselves, talk about your favorite color, what you had for breakfast, why you're here? Please do. Okay, Raj, you did. Okay, good. I don't remember your favorite color, but okay. And then Augusta, you might have audio challenges, but if you don't, say hi. And if you,
not sure if it's all good with sound.
Yeah,
for me, but yeah, I was joining. I introduced myself in new joiners meeting before, but yeah,
nice.
yeah, just coming to those meetings from time to time. Already made some pull requests.
I noticed. Yeah, your name's quite familiar. That's fantastic. How did you come across the project, or kind of come across the community?
Not sure. I was just interested in this open mesh thing, or how to use Meshery. Was interesting to do that, and it's a good way, like through open source, to get familiar with it.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's great. Hey, welcome. What keeps you busy for the majority of the day? Like what full-time role, studying, lifting weights?
Yeah, I work as a platform engineer in company full-time. And yeah, in the meantime, yeah, just learning about Kubernetes and other infrastructure things on my own.
Yeah, perfect. Good to have you. Good to have you on. Thanks for having your webcam up too. That's really nice. It's nice to see you. All right. Anybody else that we didn't get to say hi to? A bunch of old timers. Okay, good. Well, we've got a couple of topics lined up.
Hi, I'm a newcomer. Can I introduce myself?
Oh yeah, please.
Yeah, I am Siddharth Sahu. I am from India. 1 years back, I completed my engineering in computer science, and then I was working for Big Binary as a QA automation engineer. Like basically, I was working with Cypress to test React-based applications and all. And then I realized that I could do more. Then I resigned and started learning Stack. And after like 4 5 months, I kind of completed like some of the tutorials I was following from YouTube, and now like from a few weeks I started to uh, see all the open source things, and today successfully I made a contribution to OWASP project, and I was quite happy about it. My main agenda for reason for contributing to open sources to get some confidence over my skill. Basically I was following some tutorials over the internet, and this never gave me any confidence over my skills. So I hope contributing to open source project will increase my knowledge and experience. Yeah.
Good. Yeah, you've come to the right place. There's tons of people here who've got a very similar story, and many people who are living a different life now, an enlightened life of gaining a lot of experience, gaining some relationships. Yeah, good.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm quite pumped up, and I'm first of all, I'm really happy to see so welcoming people in this community, and I have high hopes I will get good mentorship and all. I'm also trying to apply for LFX program, so I hope I get through the LFX maybe.
Nice. Yeah, beautiful. Yep, there's some advice as to how to land one of those. I suspect someone will drop a link to some FAQs about that. That's
Okay.
good. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, Jared and Raj, I think you guys have kind of a similar couple of first topics. So, Jared, you want to take it away?
Yeah, sure. Good morning, y'all, or good night. Yeah, so I was able to kind of centralize everything. I'll go ahead and share my screen. But basically, I think Piyush pointed out there is a function in the auth.go file, new request, that we could put these checks for, as far as like a token goes. And so I kind of moved them over there, deleted the checks. Just in the profile result and apply commands from the perf command tree. And it seems to be working pretty well. I could do a little demo here for you. I've got a expired token in my .meshery folder. And it's just generating this error message. You either have an expired or invalid token. Please log in with Meshery system login and generate a new token. So I've tested it out. It seems to be working pretty well. My kind of question was, there's a couple checks, and I was just kind of unsure of how they fit in. So these Lasso checks here, all three of those commands check them, and I'm just a little unsure kind of how to implement them in a centralized way, because they use this response variable that is ultimately gets returned by this function. So I don't know. I was kind of looking for guidance on that, because I was kind of failing to see how I could implement that and then still return this response.profiles and having it all checked out from that centralized function and new request. So through some errors whenever I push this to the pull request, because it ends up using this response before checking it, although it gets checked within this new request function. It's probably not good to go ahead and just use it here without checking again, if that makes any sense. So that's throwing a few errors on the PR because we're using it without checking anything. Although we do check it up here in the within the new request function. So ideally, I feel like this should be included in that centralized function. I don't know, I'm just kind of looking for like what's actually going on here and what is that response variable and kind of how it all ties in together.
Okay. Jared, I have left a comment on your PR. I think we can discuss it there. The idea was to like, you can see these line of code from 140, we are like reading the response. And then we are like, we are executing the request inside the new function in your code. And now we are making a request again here on line 137. So we have already done it in new request. I think we can return the response, whatever we got from there, directly here. So we won't be making a new request on line 137. And that response will be directly passed to line 145. And we will have the the response turned into what should I say? What I'm trying to say is whatever response we got from the first request in new request function, we will return that function instead of that HTTP request at the end of the return statement. Okay, so I think am I making sense?
Gotcha. I think so. So the request returned here, we'll just feed it into here. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, kind of.
Rather
like
than making a new
we kind of already executed in the function. We already have the response from that request. So instead of doing it again in here, we will return that response directly from that function and utilize it here.
Okay, cool. Sounds easy enough. Yeah.
It will be easy once you you'll make some changes.
Piyush, are you
Well, thank you.
suggesting that we defer the reading of the response and unmarshalling of the response in this function? It would be handled by the caller.
The new request function.
Okay.
Got it. Yeah. Well, I can finish that today and then should be good to go. Thank you, guys.
Yeah. Jared, like Piyush said, I mean, when you're done, it'll have been easy. So, yeah. Nice.
Yeah, no,
Anybody
it's been great experience.
Yeah. Anybody else have comment on this before we go to Raj's? Raj, you've got something of a similar topic. Do you want to take it away?
Yeah, so the topic was we need to, notify the user to log in again once their token expired. So my approach was like with each private request, we are going to send the token. And on the backend, we are going to check whether the token is expired or not. And if it is expired, we will redirect the user to the login page.
Cool. So we're talking about kind of the same issue around making sure that users have valid tokens, one especially around tokens that haven't expired. So Jared's, I remember now, Jared's hitting it from, you guys are both hitting it from two different client perspectives. Raj from the Meshery UI, Jared from the CLI. Yeah. Okay, good. And then, yeah, Raj, please continue.
Yeah, so Piyush commented on GitHub issue that because it's a big UI change, we need to discuss something about UX.
So okay, so Raj was proposing that if someone is like working with the / profile page on UI, and suddenly he got that it is expired. So what he'll do is he'll save that URL as a parameter and redirect them to login again. And once they have logged in again, they'll get redirected to the same page.
Yep.
Okay, so that's what he's proposing. I think there are several things to make sure that we do, like clear the cache stored in our browser, the cookies, and then make this redirection actually happen. So I'm not a UI geek. I think Nitish and other people can comment how this can be executed.
The behavior sounds pretty great, right? So that people don't lose their place, basically. Like they might have navigated to a particular area in the UI. Their session expires, their token expires. They go about the business of re-authenticating and logging back in. And when they're done, instead of dropping them onto the homepage, the main dashboard, they're redirected back to where they go. And so the UX sounds pretty great. There's a dependency that was just being updated today. It was a UI redirect dependency. So Raj, is part of the approach that you've been looking at here, is the focus of the changes that you're looking at like a configuration of Next.js or use of some other library? And so, yeah, so let me try to phrase that into more of a question, I guess, which is like, of what you've considered thus far, is the focus of the change that you're working on, is that a Next.js configuration, or is that incorporation of use of a library that will help track where to redirect the user back to, or is there something custom that you're thinking about?
No, so far I think we can do with the existing libraries, because whenever we do a redirection for the user, there is an inbuilt HTML tag which stores the value if the user is coming from some redirected page. So yeah, once successful login, we can use that information to redirect the user back to the page.
Cool. What's the question? Or is it just verification that that the approach that you're specifying right here, there can be multiple ways to solve this, but I'm assuming that each request we are sending the token to the server, and with each request, private routes, that on the server side, we are verifying the token. Yes, we are. So once the token expires, while the user is on the performance page, for example, they can be redirected to login. On the login page, we can have a logic to check if the user is being redirected from performance. Yes, yes, yes. Great. Yes, yes. Anything further thinking beyond just the UX of that, like the actual implementation of it? Have you looked at how you would do it?
No, I don't have any more questions, but what sort of metadata are you guys saving in the browser that I have to clear apart from the token?
That you need to clear, is that what you said?
Any inbuilt data I should clear before redirecting the user?
No, there's a cookie that gets set when the user signs in. So that's one thing to be familiar with. There are, I don't recall specific use of local storage or other caching that you need to be aware of? There might be others on the call that are more familiar. Aditya or Deepayan or Yash or Gaurav or Pranav or I don't know that. Yeah, no. Even if there were, it's not like we necessarily would want to invalidate any of that cache. So good. So by the way, for clarification of the focus that you're looking at, there was another individual who had been working on notifying the user that they had an expired token. So that if the user was, if someone had signed in, they got up and left their keyboard for, a day, they come back, that there would be a modal saying, or they would have been auto redirected, or there would be a modal. I'm trying to remember, like, what's the current experience? Was that implemented? Yash, Raj, if you don't know, that's fine.
It wasn't. I think there's still an open PR on it, but since we couldn't finalize the UX that we wanted.
Okay. What was do you recall the outstanding question about the UX? Just like anything is better than, whether we show them a modal or we auto redirect to login, either of those two things is better than just leaving the user with a broken interface.
Yeah, this is the one. Yeah.
So I think this contributor has been on the call in the past. Does anybody know? I think that's Mohammed. Oh, Maud Uzar. Anybody familiar with acquaintances with Maud? It'd be great to get him on the call again. Okay, so Raj, good. That's good clarification. You're not focused on this. The thing is, Raj, as you look at that, implementing it, like it's one in the same effort as what this is. So, if you would you please reach out to Maud and look to collaborate? Because if you implement something, it'll conflict with what's there. And cool.
Yeah, sure.
Any other questions, Raj? Any other feedback for Raj? Cool. Raj, you're not familiar with Next.js by chance, and Next.js's ability to handle such a thing?
I can learn Next.js in 1 or 2 days. That's
cool.
Not a huge deal, I would say.
There might be something there, like a framework like that. It's a very commonplace use case for any web app. So the framework might handle something. Well, good. Well, so as we move on to the next topic, I figured since we're talking about tokens and expiring them, talking about tokens, the improving the user experience when someone has an expired token or they just haven't authenticated to the system, to Meshery server. I'll also note that there's been kind of a long-standing issue. It's a security-related issue having to do with tokens. So there are, Meshery users get a token, get an authentication, authenticate and get a token from a provider, an identity provider. And that's like the first screen that they're shown when you go to use Meshery. And there's a drop-down list. There's a couple of choices. One of the choices is, it's called none. It's the built-in local provider. When you choose the local provider, the user is essentially choosing to have, essentially a single user experience in using Meshery, and good. Now, for that Meshery deployment, they're basically an anonymous user using a tool that they've, using Meshery that they've deployed. So they're like an anonymous user. There's a token that's generated, and for that particular session, if I have Meshery up, I'll show it just for context. Like a gust of I wonder if you don't have potentially, if you don't have ideas about this. Let me show it. I can find my web browser. This might not be something to address now. It's been an open issue for actually a long time. I'll describe it like this. If you've ever deployed Kubernetes, which a lot of you have, you'll note that there's a Kubernetes dashboard. Sometimes some of you have used that. When you want to go or just Kubernetes dashboard or Kubernetes API, and as you go to interface with that API or you go to interface with that dashboard, there's a couple of different authentication mechanisms to use. One of those is a token, a bearer token, and that helps provide security to your deployment of Kubernetes, especially if you have the dashboard there and you have it exposed on the net. So it was like a year and a half or so ago, it became somewhat painful that a lot of people were adopting Kubernetes and turning on the dashboard and then exposing it on the net. And that became, and then the use of that token and some of the security concerns around it was unfortunate because people could gain administrative access to clusters. So as people go to log into Meshery and they choose none, this basically a facade of a token, kind of an empty token is generated. And it's the same token that's generated every time. And so there's a security concern here. So while it's true that this deployment of Meshery that I'm using right here, it does require a token for any client, like the UI here, to interface with the server's APIs. That token is well known and insecure. And so, this isn't a unique challenge or a challenge unique to this project. So I figured those that are familiar with Kubernetes and part of how that project has solved this challenge. Does anyone have comment as to some of the typical approaches that are taken for for generating and kind of securing?
Yeah. So to highlight something, if your Meshery is behind the ingress, you may not see this kind of issue, because whenever it is installed and it has a load balancer IP exposed, then you have this particular issue coming in. So that is my idea. So I have also tried to do that. So if you install it behind a ingress, then of course you will not be able to log in with none.
And so Samir's point, Samir, correct me if what I'm saying is wrong, but like part of the point that you're making is, I'm going to put some words in your mouth, but it's, as a project, we could say, we can just acknowledge that deployments of Meshery with that, like, hey, basically we could say, don't deploy Meshery and expose the UI or the Meshery server unprotected.
Yes.
Because, and it's like, hey, don't do that. And so we're kind of identifying it either as out of scope for the project. It's like, look, there's all kinds of security mechanisms to use. Samir just mentioned one. Use another tool to make sure that you're protecting this endpoint. You're protecting this.
Otherwise, by default, when we are telling it is load balancer, we can make it as a cluster IP and then do port forwarding. So that.
Yeah. And for any, and to Samir's point, like for any, seasoned or not, anyone who's running Kubernetes or running any amount of infrastructure, like these are security concerns that they have to deal with routinely with any software, any infrastructure that they're deploying. So this isn't odd in any way. Over time, and so it might be something that, again, I'm bringing up now, but maybe we just choose to punt it down the field and potentially address later, if you imagine that there's a million Meshery users in the future, it's probably, we at some point, as a project, we'd probably say, hey, this out of the box security posture just isn't going to cut it anymore. We don't want to ship a piece of software that has that, but that is insecure by default, or that doesn't. So like an example here is if you all have, probably you all have like a Wi-Fi router at home. It used to be Wi-Fi routers, you deploy them. Well, it used to be they just pull up an open network and anybody could come by and you'd share your network with them, your wireless network. It would be insecure. Also, the administrative interface on that Wi-Fi router would also be open or have a standard like admin password. And over time, as the internet picked up and more people got Wi-Fi at home, Wi-Fi was more prevalent. Like those things have been changed. Like they'll ship you the unit, and then they'll say you've got to change your password on the first, like as you deploy it. So eventually, when we reach our 1 millionth and one user, then we'll be forced to address this. In the meantime, does anybody have? I mean, Samir's statement is perfect, and it's like one of those things to have in the doc. In our deployment docs, is like, hey, a hardened deployment of Meshery includes endpoint protection. And so here's, there's a variety of ways to accomplish that.
And we have the by default services load balancer. If we can make it as cluster IPs, and people will be forced to use port forwarding. So
yeah, it's totally. That is such a great suggestion. That's an evolution of the project. I think so right now, what we have more of a challenge of is people trying to deploy Meshery and stumbling all over, like even being able to expose the endpoint to get to the thing. And yeah, I think that to Samir's point, we'll hit an inflection point by which there's enough seasoned operators using Meshery and saying, look, like here's one step towards a more secure out of the box posture. So, Samir, if you don't mind, like put a pin in that, like that's an inevitability. I think that we would.
Yeah, we'll write it down on community page so people can. Exactly. Yeah. And for the standalone installations who all are doing, so it is very much kind of cloud agnostic. So there are policies which you can enforce. So VM should not have public IPs, so that they will be using some kind of a ingress path or gateway.
Yeah, perfect. I'm going to try to share a couple of links as we move on to the next topic, but there should absolutely be, there's a draft guide to like a hardened, what a production deployments look like and the various considerations that people need to make. Yeah, so Samir, good point. Okay, other comments on tokens security? Okay, I'll take some notes, but in the meantime, there's got an agenda item here, review lifecycle configurator designs. I suspect we're probably not quite there yet. Is this anyone's agenda item in particular, or is that for next time?
Yeah, something we should review next time.
Okay. Migration of MeshKit repo. I'd like to talk about this one, but we don't have to. Ashish, you've got a topic on multi-cluster. Nivendu, I dropped this in your lap, and so I don't know if this is something you want to speak to now, or if we should speak about multi-cluster first.
Yeah, I think we can speak about multi-cluster, and the only update I have is that we more or less came to a consensus on what the proposed test should look like, and those are linked in the meeting minutes.
Okay. Yeah, that's did you have those handy? Like, it'd be good to get those in front of everybody.
Yep, sure. Let me just quickly share my screen. So here is the link to the proposed test. So what we have here is I kind of have articulated what test Meshery should run. So this test span across the Meshery repo as well as the adapter repos. So we test across Meshery CTL, Meshery UI, and Meshery server. So the way these are structured is some of these are the modifications to the current implementation of this test, whereas some of these are entirely new. So we are proposing new tests, including some smoke tests and end-to-end tests. So that is pretty much it. And in the last week's build and release call, we were discussing about these tests, and a few of the people who are working on these tests, like we tried and updated it, and I think it is good to go, and we can start implementing it. I'll try to open up issues to like tackle this last time. So, yeah. And feel free to like, give any comments or suggestions, because like there weren't a lot of people on the build and release call, so now it might be a better time to like, have more eyes on this.
Yeah, this is good. For my part, I'm just digesting. So, by the way, I'll repeat a little bit of this just because your voice wasn't coming through crystal clear. But that's that there's lots of use of GitHub workflows. So every time someone opens a PR, every time a PR is merged, every time a release is made, and then even many times in between all of that, there are workflows being run, tests being run, environments being temporarily stood up, code being compiled and tested. Some of those test results are now centralized and pushed into Meshery docs, into the compatibility matrix there. So you can see the latest status of integration tests that have been run. I think Navendu is pointing out that the integration tests are basic in nature today. They're not real specific. Ashish and Navendu, Mario, like what do we have for in the works for more specific, for deeper tests using patterns? Ashish, can you speak to that?
Yeah, so recently I updated patterns repo to have more patterns. So one thing is that with the patterns, we can test that we're able to deploy more and more complex patterns using Meshery. For example, we had an import feature recently. So you can basically condense a big pattern file into a smaller pattern file. And when we test that, we can be sure that, basically all the features that Meshery says it provides, it actually does. So the next step might be to basically right now, mostly we have pattern files that are very specific to Istio. So we have book info and we have other apps only for Istio. So we can have more application inside of our service mesh patterns repo that reflect that basically for traffic, for OSM, for Kuma, basically we have applications for different types of service meshes. And then maybe we can have like using the import feature, we can have one pattern file that imports all these different pattern files, and then we can use this smaller pattern file and
wait, Ashish, I think you probably can you show people part of what this is? Can we make an ask of those that we want to volunteer here? Because patterns are, and use of those are going to be pervasive within Meshery. And so we should have any number of like patterns, designs available. But we should have a bunch of sample apps.
Yeah, so if so this is what Navendu is showing right now. This repository is also what we use when we seed our content for the local provider. So if you want to, so basically we encourage people to write more and more pattern files. There's also in our discuss form, we also discuss how to write pattern files and all. So you can go to the discuss form, and if you want to have some help writing any kind of pattern file, there are people available there. There are demo pattern files there. You can get an idea about how to write a pattern file. If you go to the service mesh patterns, can you click on the go to the root repository. Here you also have a usage.markdown, usage.md, which basically goes over a few of the features of a few of the fields in a pattern file and how you can use them. This needs to be updated. I'll update it to reflect because still a lot of people don't actually know how to write them. So like, for example, a lot of people don't know what references are in a pattern file, which is a very powerful construct. A lot of people don't know how we can use depends on and all. So this is kind of an overview of those things, and I'll update it to reflect more and more thing. So I'll encourage that if you really want to volunteer, you can volunteer and write your own pattern file. So you can go over to any particular service meshes manifest, and you can convert that into a pattern file by putting it onto services. Service is basically a unit of deployment in a pattern file. So I'll add that in this users.md as well. So as you understand more and more about the pattern files, you can even contribute to the service mesh patterns repo, updating the users.markdown and all. But moreover, I would really encourage people to write pattern files for different service meshes and then create a pull request in this particular repository. And it's very easy to write a pattern file. You can ping me for that. You can I would actually encourage you to start a public discussion either in the discuss forum or in the Meshery Slack channel, and people would be more than happy to help you there. And as we have more and more pattern files, we can use your pattern files for our tests that we do in our adapters. So basically, the more the pattern files, the more we can the robust our systems would be, as we'll have more and more tests to run with those pattern files.
So what's the status on use of a pattern file within one of the workflows? Like each of the Meshery adapters should be deploying a sample app at this point?
Yeah, so right now, if I go over to the, if you go over, wait a second, I should share my screen.
We can share.
Hello, I'm audible now?
Yep.
Yeah, okay, so this spreadsheet is where we track the status of all the adapters. So as you can see, we are deploying the currently we're deploying the sample app only for Istio. And actually we're not even deploying the sample app, we are deploying the add-ons actually. So sample apps are not being deployed for any other service, for any of the adapters. We are only deploying the control plane and their subsequent add-ons like Prometheus and Grafana, and we are testing whether the pods come up properly or not. So the next step would be, again, we like book info app. We can have deploy a book info app as a end-to-end test for Istio, and we can maybe deploy an emoji voto for Linkerd. And each of these applications, each of these service meshes have their own in their repos. They actually have the manifest for their own applications, which can be converted into a pattern file pretty easily. So if you want to contribute in this place, then you can basically write. Then first thing that you would need to do is to create a pattern file for that. And I think for like Istio, we already have the book info app and everything. So the next step would be, if anyone wants to contribute, is to create a pull request in the mesh Istio adapter. And basically, if I go over to the current test that we currently run, so okay, so inside of workflows, we have this E2E tests. And currently we have, currently we only test the service mesh installation and the installation of service mesh and add-ons. And here, as you can see, that we have some some in the install directory, we have these YAML files are basically pattern files. So this is a default Istio service mesh installation pattern file. So we have services here, and we only have one service, the Istio, and the type is Istio mesh. So basically it installs Istio, and the other one installs Istio along with a bunch of add-ons like Grafana and Prometheus. And here you can see the use of fields like depends on. And if you write a pattern file, it would be the pattern file will be more robust if you use fields like these and you use things like references. So the point is that currently we have only 2 pattern files, and we test against only these 2 pattern files. The ask would be to have another pattern file that first deploys the service mesh. Then what you can do is you can create another. So for example, if I go over to the service mesh patterns repo, and if I go into the samples, we already have a sample for, let's say, Istio install. Now what this Istio install does is it installs Istio, and if I go to the minimal Istio book info, okay, so here we already have this pattern. This pattern basically first also uses the import feature. It deploys your Istio service mesh, then it deploys the book info app after the Istio control plane is deployed. So the next step would be to use this particular pattern inside basically to add this particular pattern in the install directory, and then along with the 2 current pattern files against which we test our we basically do the end-to-end tests. We only have right now 2 like service mesh installation and service mesh installation with add-ons. So we can have one more like service mesh installation with the book info app, and there we would deploy this particular pattern file, which would deploy the Istio and then also deploy the book info. As you can see here, this actually references the other pattern file, which internally has the entire book info thing. So basically, this service is referencing this book info pattern file. So where is it? Okay, here it is. This particular pattern file. So this here you can see the use of references and all. If you want to make some changes to this pattern file, you can do that as well. Maybe add some extra things here and there. And the same thing we would need in other adapters as well. And for other adapters, we would also need. So for example, here we have like things like virtual service and destination routes. So in like the emoji voto for Linkerd, it has its own custom resources. So we would need those extra pattern files first in the service mesh patterns repo, and then we can use those pattern files to write E2E tests for the
who's got who's got questions?
Yes, I have got a question. Can you just go back one step back? In this, wherein you are including, wherein you are using the URL from Git.
Wait a second. Are you talking about this one?
Yes. So herein, why is it required? Like, let's say I have my namespace, which is configured inside that repo, which is you are getting from patterns book info pattern.yaml. So why is it mentioned here? So in that case, what I have
actually, okay. So the way this import feature works is that we enforce that if you write a pattern file, it would be good to, for example, okay, let me also go over to this pattern file so that I can explain. So this pattern file that we are referencing here, this is it. And it has this, if I zoom in, it has this vars field. So vars field is basically the exposed field of this particular pattern file. And every service inside of this pattern file references this field. It has a default value of, in this case, just default. So the namespace is default. So if you'll have your own deployments, it will have a default namespace. And what we are potentially doing here is overriding this. I'm just overriding that with default. You can have something else here. So this gives the ability that you have your own workloads defined with some default fields like namespace and maybe image name and everything. And when you use this, when you import that into another service, you can override all these values here.
Okay, instead of overriding here, should I have some kind of mechanism like values.yaml with Helm?
Yeah, okay, I know where you're getting at. So yeah, the idea is to basically we don't need the values.yaml because okay, so we don't need the values.yaml because we're not using Helm templates or everything. If in this case, this vars
No, not for Helm. I am just taking that a reference because we are also using the vars.
Yeah, because it would be like we have a pattern file, then we have another YAML for that pattern file. So every pattern file has a values.yaml. Helm defines its own, there's this Helm chart and it has chart.yaml, and there are a bunch of YAML, and then you have templates and everything. A service mesh, a pattern file is pattern.yaml should be basically that unit of deployment should be enough, should be basically exhaustive. So it has everything it needs. So having a values.yaml attached to each pattern.yaml is, it's like, why do we have that in another YAML? Why do we have that those fields externalized into another YAML? So each pattern file will have a different YAML to always keep track of. So and because we don't have a repository when we deploy a pattern, we have a pattern file, a single file. So in case of Helm, it makes sense.
It has two things. So one is, if somebody doesn't know how to write a pattern file, it may not be so much user friendly. Rather than, he should always go for values.yaml and do some tweak there, pass the values, and he need not to write it if you get something like that. So like from the user perspective, it becomes very long when you write a lot of pattern in the same file. And sometime, I felt, so when you keep on scrolling, so it takes my patience off.
Yeah, that's the idea of this thing, right? So for example, in this case, you could have even this Istio installation service, this is not a normal your service, like it's also importing another pattern. So the thing that you're talking about, that this long scroll of things, what we are basically saying here is that you define each unit of your deployment in one pattern file. So one pattern file does one thing and it does it perfectly, and it exposes some extra things here. So you assign someone the job of creating a pattern file that deploys let's say this book info application. So that person will create all these virtual service and everything, and no one has to even care about what internals there are. All that person has to do is create this pattern file and expose the external variables, and other people will just import that pattern file and ask, hey, what are the external variables? Okay, I can configure namespace. So basically I'm installing a book info pattern and with the namespace. So there is no scroll here. So these can be provided by the community itself. We can write these for you and we'll provide these, and we'll have as many things as externally configurable as possible. So you don't have to scroll anything, you just import them and override everything that you need. And all the sensible things that need to be overridden would be we would push them into the vars field so that they can be overridden by you. So that will basically tackle what the problem that you were facing, that why do we have so many long pattern files.
Yeah, so that holds good unless you are installing book info pattern. But when I talk about my custom deployment, which is very specific to my project, so that is where I cannot ask community to write that, because I want
to. If you have an application, that would be Kubernetes Manifest, I'm assuming, right?
It could be, or it can be like, I do not want to use manifest, I may use inline commands.
Okay, so talking in terms of Kubernetes Manifest, like if you have your deployments defined in terms of Kubernetes Manifest, in Meshery server, we have a function that takes your manifest and converts it into a pattern file. So you don't have to manually push everything into a service. It can do it for you. And once you have that inside of a pattern file, you can import that pattern file onto another pattern file and use it directly as you wish. So you don't have to, if you have a KX manifest, converting that to a pattern file is you don't have to do it manually. We provide ways to do it.
Okay, maybe I'll get more clarity when I start using it.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you, by the way. It's good.
So, yeah, there's also, I didn't catch all of the conversation. There's also a difference between writing integration tests and referencing kind of statically written pattern files versus something like a GitHub action for service mesh patterns that needs to be more generic in nature. Those are kind of two separate things. There's also, a pattern configurator in the UI in Meshery that is intended to help people not have to write YAML, because it can get, because like the configuration of a given service mesh could go on for a long time. And it's not just the service mesh, but it's Kubernetes as well. Good. So we're at time. Ashish, we're going to miss the multi-context discussion, which is unfortunate. I don't know that we're having a community call this week. We were going to move to one every, a bi-weekly cadence for community calls. So we'll see. As we go to conclude today, did we miss anything? Anybody have any open questions that were blocked on something they needed to discuss?
Yeah, from the Meshery UI, so when I was trying to create some patterns, I saw some unusual things, so I might post them in the channel with the interest of time. So even if I don't write anything in a pattern, but it is still creating some pattern, some entries in the pattern file in the right side.
Yeah, no, there's no doubt that there are awkward artifacts in that configurator interface, and we should note them and address them for sure.
Yeah.
2 quick calls for volunteers or clarification is Augusta. I was just thinking this might be of interest to you, but it might not be either. Do you want to give a quick yay or nay on this suggestion? And Augusta, were you there? Might not be. He had his webcam up before. He doesn't have it now. All right, good. The other one was the discussion that Ashish kind of took us through that was following on Nivendu's update is that of expanded integration tests. And we've got a good framework. Nivendu's, the doc that he had brought up is a healthy thing to digest, to understand how where our coverage is and at what point different tests get invoked, different workflows get invoked. If we should certainly err on the side of running too many tests, like it's kind of hard to run too many tests. But we should, the initial tests, so just to tie off today, the currently running integration tests that run every time an adapter, a pull request is, well, opened and I think merged against an adapter, the output of the results of those tests are pushed dynamically to the docs here. So this is the latest set of tests and their status for each adapter. So for the Meshery Istio adapter, it was run, the last one was run a few days ago, 4 days ago. The things that had been tested was really just basic provisioning of Istio itself, its core components. And it looks like we ran maybe some tests to deploy a couple add-ons, but don't have status of those. So Ashish, not only is there a call for volunteer, but also Ashish, this is something to dig into. Then for each adapter type, Aditya Subedi had made sure that people can drill in. So if you're looking at Meshery Istio, this is the latest set of tests run again 4 days ago. But if you want to see the historical set of tests and how that has been happening over the different versions of Istio and the different versions of the adapter, you can go back in time here, which is good. So we've had, so just actually Ashish, by way of looking at this, looks like some of those 2 tests have been successful in the past. I wonder if there's something going on that had changed recently here. So something to look into.
Okay, noted. I'll look into it.
Other comments, questions?
About both tests, so what we have to do the most to implement better testing scenarios? Or?
You know, we missed the first part of what you'd said, Augusta. Can you say that again?
Yeah, so we have to improve Meshery testing. It's like test cases or like improve tests. Like what's the key point of those tasks?
Yeah. On Ashish will send you a couple of links to one to point out the current set of tests that are running. It's because they're happening inside of GitHub workflows. And so he'll send over an example of the current test, and then he'll probably make a suggestion or two about the next set of tests that can stack on top. So right now, we're like basically automating the provisioning of each service mesh. Good, but then what about deploying an application on the mesh? What about configuring it to do traffic, to do all kinds of whatever? So that's about as far as we've taken it. We're ready for those next steps, and deploying a sample app is probably that next step. So yeah, it's a kind of a neat system. There's another Ashish will also tag Aditya Subedi. It's kind of familiar, and he's been helping with how those tests are dynamically documented. They're documented here. Ooh. It's like we've got a trailing backslash that, yeah, okay. Create an issue. All right. Well, good. Catch everybody either in the Discuss forum or on Slack or what have you. Maybe we'll have a community meeting this week. Maybe not. Guess we'll see. But nice to see you all. Catch you on the next one.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.